Hello, everyone. My name is Cat Oriel with Forbes Breaking News, and today I'm here with the delegate for the Virgin Islands, Stacey Plaskett. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you're the ranking member of the Select Subcommittee on Weaponization of the Federal Government. You just finished a hearing today about the lawfare tactics to weaponize the rule of law. What is the goal of the committee for those who might not be familiar with it? And what happened during the hearing today? What were your takeaways?
Well, the purpose of the committee is what it says, right? It's supposed to be the select committee, meaning that it's a committee that's only open for a short period of time, usually for that period of Congress, meaning 2 years. And it has a specific purpose. And this one is supposed to be to identify how the federal government has been weaponized potentially against the American people. In essence, however, what is happening on this committee, which is led by Chairman Jim Jordan, was assembled during the time that Kevin McCarthy was a Speaker of the House. And it is really a mechanism, many of us believe, to test out conspiracy theories, to push out propaganda related to President Trump. And more insidious, I think it is also being used to try and tamp social media companies from reviewing and really looking at misinformation and disinformation as we go into a 2024 presidential election. We know that in this last election, the FBI, law enforcement, and others worked very closely with the social media companies, the large ones, the small ones, to try and share with them information about bots, to share information with them about our foreign adversaries, particularly Russia, China, and Iran, the intensity in that order. And they're feeding information to the American people before an election cycle. They were really able to tamp down on that in the 2020 election. And a lot of that was an outgrowth of what they had seen in the 2016 election. And excuse me, and my Republican colleagues who say they're concerned about the FBI and other federal agencies suppressing free speech. Quite often what has happened, and we've seen reports and statistics, are that those same social media companies, and particularly its executives, have grown fearful of the getting the ire of not just the GOP, but many of the people on Twitter and elsewhere that follow them. Quite a number of them have had death threats, have moved out of their homes, fear of violence. And so they're not engaging in the type of review of post of information that's on social media because of the work of this committee.
Yes, so I know that there have been several hearings related to social media in particular, but
Six.
Sorry.
6 of them,
Six, yes.
some of which have had even the same witnesses repeatedly.
Right. So I know that wasn't the focus of the hearing today. So what was the purpose of the hearing today, and what were your takeaways from the one that happened just a few hours ago?
Sure. Most curious, this was a hearing that happened on a Wednesday, which is not when we normally have hearings. They're usually on Thursdays. And it was we didn't know we were going to have a hearing. We have been averaging on having hearings once a month. This one came fast on the heels of a previous one. But Wednesday also happens to be the day that President Trump is not in trial. And he happens to be on trial right now in New York related to a criminal case that's being prosecuted by the Manhattan District Attorney. And the subject of this hearing was, in fact, the criminal prosecution, particularly related to New York, of President Trump.
And so why do you think that it was very important for the Republicans to, during the hearing, I heard them talking about the several indictments against Trump and the hush money payment trial in particular. So why do you think that they, decided that this was something that the Weaponization Committee in particular must focus on?
Sure. I think that they have a mandate from the president, as well as other individuals on cable news and other podcasts, to be actively engaged in supporting the president. We saw members of Congress go actually to New York to be kind of in the gallery for him, to be at press conferences, to kind of speak for him in a way that he's not allowed to speak right now because of the gag order. And this is an extension of that. We have members of Congress and individuals who've represented people like Rudy Giuliani coming before the committee, trying to impeach the credibility and the testimony of Michael Cohen, as well as the case that's in front of the jury, meaning regular Americans in Manhattan, New York County District.
Going back to the committee as a whole, as someone who watches it, whenever you have a hearing once a month or so, it always
Oh,
seems
I'm so sorry for you if you're doing that.
That's okay. That's okay. It seems like the committee is more often than not clashing with Democrats and Republicans alike, pointing fingers at one another. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious for you, why did you request to serve on the committee as the ranking member? Where the House Democrat leadership's like, yes, we know Rep. Plaskett can take it. And what is it just like being there in the room? Is it actually as contentious as it is for a viewer?
Well, I'm really just so proud of the leadership of the Democratic caucus, led by my very good friend and colleague Hakeem Jeffries, with Clark, as well as Pete Aguilar. This is a group that looks like America, that represents the American people. And knowing that they were going to be in leadership, I told them, put me where you need to put me on the field, coach, so that I can be of best use and service to the caucus. And, I was honored when Leader Jeffries asked me to lead as the ranking member. I'm particularly honored because if you notice on most sides of the Democrats, when we have committees, the person who is usually the ranking or the chair is usually the most senior member. And I'm not the most senior member on the committee. There are 5 other members who have more seniority than me, but we've really coalesced as a team. I think that we work very well together. We try to support each other. And I think probably my being the ranking is maybe because I can take fighting a little bit more than the others. I may be a little quicker on the draw with it than some of the others. We have some brilliant attorneys, brilliant legislators that are on that committee. But I really take it as a point of personal pride to be the one who engages more of the argumentative back and forth than my other colleagues on the committee. Telling them, let's stick to the facts, let's stick to the truth. Don't be baited by them. If there's procedural issues, if they're really out of line, I'm going to say something. I'm going to check the chair. I'm going to check the witnesses, but really just allowing us all to be truth tellers. And it's frustrating because came to Congress in a time where Republicans and Democrats actually worked together. I mean, it wasn't wonderful. It wasn't like maybe the 40s or the 60s or something like that. But there were members that you could not just work on legislation with, but share a meal with. And you're seeing that less and less occurring. Committees that used to be bipartisan, such as Agriculture Committee, or committees like Armed Services, or committees like Transportation and Infrastructure, have themselves also become very partisan in nature, along with oversight, which I've been a member of previously, in judiciary, going way into battleground mode.
Is there any common ground at all within this committee? Any room for bipartisanship? And how has it been working with Chairman Jordan? Is this a conversation that you've had with him that there needs to be more common ground and ways for you to work together?
Sure. At the beginning of my appointment, I sent him a letter suggesting some areas that potentially we could work together on. Additionally, asking that we meet periodically to have those discussions. We had one meeting, and they didn't occur after that. And none of the suggestions that I've made have actually occurred. Even in some of the more contentious committees, you would see that the chair would just be gracious and give at least one hearing. to the topic or allow even some kind of amalgamation of a topic that the other side wanted to be a part of the conversation. And that has absolutely not occurred in this. And so Jim Jordan and I are on the same hallway. Our offices are on the same hallway. And so we see each other often, and I'm remain very cordial with him when I see him in the hallways. Say hello to all of his staff as they come in and out. I know they're doing their job, but it's very disappointing that it's not a committee where there are topics that we can work on together, and not even sharing information, courtesies of letting us know who are going to be witnesses well ahead of time, sharing transcripts, sharing videos of interviews. None of those things happen in a manner that they used to happen on committees. And I don't know if you saw, not in this hearing today, but in a previous one, even allowing evidence or reports or letters to be put into the record, not made public, but put into the record, have not been allowed by the Republicans, which even a Republican member has says was absolutely unheard of in his 20-something years in Congress.
Right. I think the lack of coordination is sometimes apparent even as just a viewer. Like today, you and the minority witness being unaware that, it was 8 minutes of allotted time for the opening statement compared to the 5 that she prepared for.
Sure.
And so
then him telling her that she can ad lib. No, she wants to make a concise argument. And
right.
knowing that she could have had 3 more minutes to do that is a long period of time.
Right. So there are small, areas where there's clashing, but then at the same time, some large personal attacks made against you and other members on your side. So, during the hearing, Rep. Harriet Hageman accused Rep. Dan Goldman of prepping Michael Cohen ahead of the trial and accused you of, in her words, quote, being Jeffrey Epstein's fixer. So I just wanted to give you now an opportunity. What do you say to this attack?
I mean, I think it's immature. I think it's ridiculous. I think that, it borders on slanders for individuals. For myself, who took a donation and then turned it back in, to say that that makes me someone who's dead's fixer is ridiculous. And to say that Dan Goldman, who is here in Washington, busy working on legislative matters, to say that he is prepping Michael Cohen without any evidence to support that is just irresponsible, particularly for someone who says that she's been a member of the bar and practiced law for over 20 years.
And then just so that it's on the record and very clear, can you just respond to the overall sentiment? You said that you gave the money back. So what do you say to the Republicans who are still accusing you and bringing it up that you are linked to Epstein through political donations?
Well, I mean, the Republicans are going to say what they're going to say. That's what they're supposed to, that's what they believe they're supposed to do. And my response is, let's just getting back to legislative work. I think that the body of legislation that I have speaks for itself. I think that all the work that I've done is supporting the people of the Virgin Islands and people in the United States who are not individuals who benefit from and are not billionaires and millionaires. I think that they're the ones who are out there every day through their legislation, through their tax laws, supporting the very few and the very wealthy in this country. All of the legislation, the work that I'm doing, are supporting everyday Americans.
Well, thank you for talking to me about the committee and shedding some light on that. I do just want to touch on your background and your work on the Virgin Islands, because actually today during your opening statement, I learned that you were a Republican actually until 2008. So just tying it all back together of what we've been talking about with bipartisanship and just the, the lack of bipartisanship in Congress today, not just in the Weaponization Committee, but as a whole. What do you think led to that shift where you decided to go to the Democratic Party, and how does the Republican Party today differ than the one that you belong to?
Well, I served as a staffer for Republican members of Congress. Some of them, if I see them, as many staffers do, I still call them boss when I see them. They think that's pretty funny. But these were gentlemen who were really interested in supporting people and supporting their constituents, who were moderate Republicans. And I served and was very proud to serve after September 11th at the Justice Department under President George W. Bush. And when people ask me what caused me to go over to the Democratic Party, I simply state to them that I didn't go anywhere. I stayed exactly where I was. The Democratic Party is a large enough tent that we can have blue dogs and moderates and new Dems and progressives and people from all over the country that look different ways. And my values fit right in there. And the Republican Party moved away from me and is now a party that is focused on power, focused on fear and hate among us, is not trying to unite Americans, but trying to continually divide them so that they can retain power to themselves.
And so beyond the work on this committee, what are your priorities when it comes to representing the Virgin Islands? And how do you make sure your voice is heard as a non-voting delegate?
Well, correction is that I'm not non-voting, I'm limited voting.
Okay.
And that's
So yeah,
something
what does
that,
that mean? Because I don't think a lot of people understand that distinction at
right.
all.
So the distinction is that non-voting would mean that you have absolutely no vote. And limited voting means that I vote in committee fully. I actually vote on the floor up until final passage of legislation. So if there are amendments on the floor, we also do that. And I think it just remains the same way I've lived my entire life as a Black woman, is that you've got to work harder, you got to do more to have your voice heard, to be taken seriously. I know that the people of the Virgin Islands are really amazing people who have been a part of this country. Even before we were purchased from Denmark in 1917, we, have given some of our best, whether it's in wars and fighting with the United States, or one of our best and brightest with men putting their money together to send Alexander Hamilton to New York from the island of St. Croix, where my family is from and where I live, to be a part of the American experience. And so, like him, I believe that, government is here to support us, to grow business, to support economies, to give people freedoms, for people to be able to have their voice. And that's how I fight for the people of the Virgin Islands. Most of my focus is on ensuring that the Virgin Islands is treated equitably when legislation comes out, because we have been forgotten, because we have disproportionately been left behind, that there's work to be done to ensure that we can have the same opportunities that people living on the mainland can have.
Would you like to see statehood for the Virgin Islands one day?
I think I'd like to see whatever the people of the Virgin Islands want, whether that's statehood, but most definitely more than anything, people of the Virgin Islands just want to be treated fairly. I know that they would love to have a vote for president. We serve in the military in disproportionately larger numbers than people that are living on the mainland. That was one of the first things that we asked for when we became citizens, was to be part of the draft, to have the responsibility along with the benefits of being part of the American experience. And so I think that that's what we want at this time, to be given a vote, to vote for our president in the same way the District of Columbia does, although they're not a state. And we would also like to be treated fairly and to be considered in legislation in the same manner that people living on the mainland do.
And my last question for you, just looking toward the election, what is your outlook for 2024? Are you confident Democrats will take back the House? And what would Democrats do if they are to regain the majority?
Well, I'm really excited about that. I believe that we have a great opportunity to take the House and to make Hakeem Jeffries the next Speaker of the House, the first African American to be Speaker of the House, the second in line to the presidency. And I'm even more excited because I know what a man of integrity is, how he has continued to put people over politics in everything that he does. And that's been the mantra that Democrats have had. I know that as someone who has sat on the Ways and Means Committee, that there is a tax bill that's going to be expiring, the Trump tax bill that supported the wealthiest Americans at the expense of middle class and working Americans. And I know that that's something that we're going to work really hard on. And we're also going to ensure that in the same way we did during the pandemic, that Americans had the support that they need to move ahead, that we're going to advance that agenda even more after 2024.
And then what would happen if, say, Democrats went back to the House, but there's potentially a second term for the Trump presidency? How would Democrats handle that?
If God forbid he became president, we try to find mutual grounds in areas that we can work on. But everyone needs to remember that Congress is the one that has the power of the purse. And so we will use that to ensure that we support Americans and their ideals to home ownership, wealth creation, to have opportunities to work and to advance, to have health care, to feel safe, their own bodily autonomy. Those are the things that we're going to make sure that will be advanced and that we will be a stop to an individual who has shown that should he become president again, he will be out of control and interested only in his own benefit.
Well, that's the end of my questions. Thank you so much. Is there anything you would like to add that we didn't get to touch on yet?
No, sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time today, Congresswoman.
Thank you.